Richard the tiger, who spent 15 long years in a cramped metal cage, was finally rescued and moved to a specialized rehabilitation center, where a completely new life was being prepared for him. No one could say for certain how he would behave when he felt true freedom for the first time in so long and found himself outside the familiar walls. At the moment, the door of his temporary shelter began to rise slowly. A light breeze slipped through the air, and for Richard, this became the first signal of change. For him, it meant the beginning of a different chapter, and all those present involuntarily froze, trying not to spook this important moment. An exhausted face appeared in the opening, and the people around seemed to even stop breathing, afraid to break the silence. It was a truly significant moment for both the tiger himself and the staff of the Wild Planet Foundation, who had put immense effort into his rescue. After a short hesitation, a heavy paw cautiously touched the ground, covered with thick and soft grass, and this became his first step into a new life. Richard lowered his gaze, as if trying to comprehend what was happening, and it was clear that he did not understand how to react to these unfamiliar sensations. For the first time, he felt the living earth beneath him, which sprang under his weight, and this caused him obvious confusion. People struggled to hold back their emotions, watching as an adult predator bewilderedly mastered the simplest things that are ordinary for other animals. This tiger should not have spent the best years of his life in captivity, but fate had decided otherwise. By the age of 15, he had never known what space and true freedom of movement were. He spent the first years of his life in a small private zoo on the outskirts of a province in Kazakhstan, where conditions were extremely harsh and far from normal. His cage was a narrow and gloomy space in which there was neither shelter nor room for movement. The only entertainment was the opportunity to observe other animals and rare visitors who passed by his enclosure from time to time. In his youth, Richard showed a lively interest in people, as there was nothing in his world to occupy his attention, and any movement outside the cage seemed unusual. However, over time the flow of visitors dried up, and the situation changed for the worse, depriving him of even this meager variety. There were fewer and fewer animals in the zoo, and soon the owners announced its closure, without properly taking care of the fate of all its inhabitants. All the animals that were smaller and easier to transport were quickly moved to other places, while Richard remained because he was considered too difficult to transport. He lay motionless and watched as his neighbors were loaded into cars one by one and driven away, not understanding what was happening. By evening, the territory was empty, and only one tiger remained in the abandoned place, doomed to loneliness. He sat by the bars and waited, hoping that they would come for him too, but time passed and nothing changed. He had no food, no water, not even bedding, and his world shrank to cold metal bars and a hard concrete floor. Days turned into weeks, and he continued to look into the void, not losing a faint hope for salvation. Over time, local residents learned about his situation, and several concerned people began to bring him food so that he would not die of exhaustion. No one knew where he could be placed, and official services showed no interest in his fate. When the zoo was still working, his powerful roar echoed far across the neighborhood, but now a heavy silence fell, in which there was not a sound. He called for help for too long without receiving an answer, and eventually just stopped doing it, as if resigned to his fate. Loneliness became an unbearable ordeal for him, which slowly destroyed him from the inside. Winters in this region were cold and harsh, and without normal shelter, Richard suffered through the frosts, which weakened his body even more. 5 long years passed like this, filled with emptiness and monotony. Despite the fact that he was regularly brought food, his existence could not be called a full life, as he was deprived of everything else. His coat became dull and matted, his gaze became empty and lifeless, and his interest in the world around him completely disappeared. When he turned 15, people began to seriously fear that he would not live long in such conditions. No one wanted such a majestic animal to end its life in complete oblivion and loneliness. He had lived many years, but never knew what it meant to be free and live in a normal environment. Loneliness behind bars was unworthy of such a strong and beautiful creature, and this was understood by everyone who learned his story. However, fate still decided to intervene, and the situation began to change. The story of the forgotten tiger spread far beyond the borders of the country, attracting the attention of caring people. The international organization Wild Planet, which rescues animals in distress, learned about it. Experts quickly realized there was no time to lose and began to urgently organize a rescue operation. When the team arrived at the site, what they saw made a heavy impression on them, as the conditions were truly terrible. The space in which Richard lived was tiny and completely unsuitable for a large predator. This strong and beautiful beast had spent his whole life here, without the opportunity to see the world beyond the cage. He had never seen open spaces, never felt the ground under his paws, and had no opportunity for a normal existence. He had no toys, no shelter, and no communication, and his life was devoid of any stimuli. Moreover, it is very likely that he had never met other tigers and did not know how to interact with his own kind. The most terrible thing was that he spent the last 5 years in total loneliness, without any contact with the outside world. It became obvious that action had to be taken immediately, without delaying the rescue for even a day. Local residents said that he was born right in this zoo and was immediately separated from his mother, receiving not even minimal care. He did not know what a family was, did not experience maternal warmth, and never played with other cubs, as happens in nature. His life experience was limited by the walls of the cage, and this greatly affected his behavior. When the rescuers approached closer, they saw him huddled in the farthest corner, where he lay motionless. He didn't even open his eyes when they began to speak to him, and it looked as if he had completely lost interest in what was happening. It seemed that he had finally lost hope and simply existed, expecting nothing good. At 15, he was already considered an old animal, especially considering the conditions in which he lived. In captivity, tigers can live up to 20 years, but only with good care, enough space, and quality nutrition. He had none of this, and his condition caused serious concern. All participants in the rescue operation were determined that he should spend the remaining years of his life in decent conditions. The main task was to organize his safe relocation to a suitable place where he could recover. The team began to actively handle the paperwork and look for the best option for his placement. After many negotiations and approvals, the decision was made to move him to a nature reserve in India, where good conditions were created for him. It was impossible to release him into the wild because he did not have the necessary survival skills, but the protected territory gave him a chance at a normal life. Difficulties arose with organizing transportation, but in the end, a large airline agreed to help in this matter. The next stage was to ensure safety during the long flight, which required a special approach. A sturdy container was made for him, painted in a light color to reduce heating from sunlight. Inside, special calming scents and preparations were used to reduce stress levels during transport. All procedures were carried out very carefully so as not to cause the animal additional discomfort. On the day of departure, the loading went smoothly and without complications, which was a good sign for all participants in the operation. It seemed that Richard intuitively felt that something better awaited him, and therefore did not resist. For the team, this flight was also unusual, as they previously had to transport groups of animals rather than a single, large predator. 2 employees accompanied him on the plane and could not suppress smiles, knowing that the other passengers had no idea about their unusual fellow traveler. Upon arrival, it became clear that he had endured the journey well and was in a relatively stable condition. Now, the most difficult stage began: adaptation to a new environment that was radically different from everything he had known before. Accustomed to a cramped cage, he found himself in a huge territory with grass, trees, and many new smells and sounds. His muscles were weakened due to long immobility, so it was difficult for him to move and maintain balance. The container was placed on his plot, after which everyone moved to a safe distance so as not to disturb him. The lid rose slowly, and the tiger cautiously looked out, looking around carefully. He was still under the influence of the preparations and perceived the new environment with noticeable caution. The unfamiliar feeling of the earth under his paws seemed strange and even frightening to him. A few minutes of tense waiting passed before he decided to take the first step outside the container. He slowly came out, swaying slightly on his weakened legs, and stopped, looking around. Once fully free, he froze, as if not believing that the bars had disappeared and no longer restricted him. Then, something happened that deeply touched everyone present and made many unable to hold back tears. He lay right on the grass and raised his head, looking at the sky, which was clear and bright. A light breeze ruffled his fur, and birds circled high above, which he watched with sincere surprise. At that moment, it became obvious that he had never even looked at the sky before or seen this expanse. In the following days, he gradually became bolder and spent more and more time exploring the surrounding territory. He began to play with objects he found and show interest in his new surroundings, as if rediscovering the world. His behavior resembled that of a young animal just beginning to learn about life. For the first time in many years, he had a real interest in what was happening around him. At first, he was kept separately to give him time to get used to it and avoid possible conflicts. Nearby were other tigers named Arman and Kai, and they showed clear interest in him. At first, he avoided close contact and kept his distance, watching them from afar. However, the other tigers were friendly and greeted him every morning, calling out. He had been silent for many years, but gradually the situation began to change, and he began to react to their presence. After some time, he approached the edge of the plot and lay down near the fence, watching them and getting used to their scent. After a while, he stood up, looked at them more confidently, and let out a quiet but distinct roar. After long years of silence, he finally found his voice again and began to return to a normal life. His existence had completely changed, and with each day he became stronger and more active. He learned to run, jump, explore the territory, and interact with the world around him. Communication with other tigers began to bring him joy, and he increasingly sought this contact. Once he was the loneliest creature, but now that was in the past, and ahead of him lay years of life filled with freedom, movement, and peace. Dear viewers, what do you think of this story? Please tell us in the comments. And if you liked this video, please like and subscribe to our channel. Goodbye.